midst. It's like having ministers speak to us, isn't it? They're speaking to us and touching our hearts at such deep levels. Lucretia, that was just wonderful to have your witnessing to us. And our true colors are what we really want to tap into and really stay there in them authentically. Know our spiritual powers sustain us. So today, we are going to complete a series on the Untethered Soul, a book written by Michael Singer, a book all about the condition of being a human is that we have thoughts that run through our head nonstop, that are in our mortal mind, that go round and around and around, and do not get us where we want to go. They're just thoughts that continue to drive us and motivate us without bringing peace to ourselves. And so the book is about how do we then free ourselves so that we can be free individuals and pursue happy lives. Now, our Declaration of Independence says life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is what we all want, isn't it? Yes. And yet it's so hard to achieve and difficult even more to sustain, and it certainly cannot be legislated. So you and I must need to go to a higher plane, a spiritual plane, in order to achieve and sustain that amount of happiness that we want. Our beautiful Buddhist monk that lives in France at Plum Village, Thich Nhat Hanh, has spent his life dedicated to kindness and compassion, toward peace, toward feeling it within oneself and extending it out to all humankind. And what he says is that enlightenment, joy, and peace can never be given to you. The well is inside you. So when we think about it, our job is to go deep and dig deep in knowing our true spiritual selves and then bringing it out from what's already there. You and I cannot live happy lives if we're dried up and empty on the inside. So this replenishing of oneself in spirit with our spiritual community, with what we read that sustains and uplifts us, the thoughts and words we say fill up that well. And when we come from that, we're likely to be creative, happy people, more flexible, less resentful, able to move through difficult situations quicker and easier. So today, we want to say then, or ask this question: what determines our happiness or our unhappiness? So the question really stops us to think about, we know what we want, and we want to stay there in a place of happiness. So the question is, what keeps us from that place? And we have all the spiritual masters say this: it's our thoughts and our perceptions. What we think about determines whether we're happy or unhappy. And our ability to just stand in the moment and choose happiness is not the easier way, is it? It's the road less traveled. Let's say that. But when we understand that we are moving in that realm of happiness for ourselves and with others, we understand we're on a path, not just for unconditional happiness, but it's a path of our spiritual journey. It's a path of transcendence. Coming above that which ordinarily provoke us, irritate us, bother us, and moving into a happier realm of relationships and health and prosperity, and affirming it to be true. Now, what we find is that our thoughts, though, our perceptions, have a default. That we are more likely, when upset, to go to a place that we've been before, and we get in a rut. So if we begin to say, all right, I am really, truly now irritated, and I go to anger, or I go to sadness, or I might go to just removing myself and running away, escaping from a situation. If we understand what our default is, we are more likely then to move beyond it and do a reset default. So our default comes more from I'll just stay in this space and let whatever thought or feeling I'm experiencing at the moment just pass on through me. I can't remember which spiritual master said, a question was asked, don't you ever have any angry feelings? And the answer was, of course, but what determines it is how quickly it moves on through me. And so if you and I can reset our default to allowing our feelings to flow through us and settle into, I choose to be happy in this moment. I'm just choosing to stay right here and be present in it and let whatever feelings are working in me just be there, knowing they can pass through. Have you ever experienced that? You know, once we begin to understand, our spiritual masters also work on this. The Dalai Lama came to Williamsburg about 4 or 5 years ago. I went with Elsie and her family, and we had this delightful afternoon of watching the Dalai Lama wearing a William and Mary cap on his head and speak to thousands of young people. And he says, if I can be happy, so can you. I lost everything. First, as a young child, I was taken away from my immediate family because I had my work to do, my religious work to do. And then once embedded in it as a young man, the Chinese came in and invaded Tibet, and I had to leave that. I had to leave everything for which I had set my life's goals to do. And in threat of death, I was able to move into safety. But that feeling of loss could stay with me, and I could choose to be angry and resentful and want to retaliate. But I choose not to. I choose to be happy. And then he just giggled, and everybody there giggled with him in that moment, because we knew the depth of what he was saying. If he can choose to be happy, so can we. And it's at that choice level that we can operate and learn that we truly are in the way sometimes of our own happiness. We're perpetuating our own suffering. Now, we don't think we're doing it at the time. We might think we're holding on to what is right in our minds. But when we let go of it, we realize the freedom that comes from it. When we release that pent-up feeling, either a hurtful feeling or resentment or a moment of anger, just let it pass on through. What we've come through is an untethering of our soul. Our soul. Our soul that can make choices of staying in the world's problems or being free with spirit. Being free as individuals to live lives as happily as we can. Not reactive, not caught up in circumstances. So this path of transcendence, moving beyond anything that we create, moving beyond a drama, moving beyond what could be even a melodrama, is our life's work, because we know how easily we can get trapped in it. So we just have to relax and let it go, laugh and let it go. Lowell Fillmore, who was the eldest son of Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, our co-founders of Unity, built his life's work on affirmative prayer, as did his parents. He wrote a book, The Prayer Way to Health, Happiness, and Health, Wealth, and Happiness. And he said the only way to get beyond any of our situations and not caught up in them is just to affirm our way out, envision, imagine, see ourselves living lives that are healthy, wealthy, and prosperous in our own realms. In our own realms. And as we begin to hear some of his affirmations, such as I am free, I am unlimited. I'm a wealthy child of God. I am the beloved. When we finally begin to see that we can step into affirming those for ourselves, we begin to move that default. We begin to take control and shape our thoughts and our perceptions. And we do it in faith, and we do it knowing we have that spiritual ability within us. So Lowell says, if we address a prayer to God, but keep our attention on the problem, then we're going to continue to have the problem. But if we allow ourselves to fix on the omnipresence of God, fix on this allness of God and this power of God and God's goodness, we know that we will run into that heavenly condition and stay there. Now, once we understand we can use affirmative prayer to help us, we have to remember that in unity we have a Trinity, as does traditional Christianity's Trinity of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Metaphysically, in unity, we have divine mind, divine idea, divine expression. And so if you and I say that we want to stay connected to God, God mind, we're saying we want to stay in this omnipresence of all good. And if we say we want to have this, maintain this idea of who we can be, this perfect pattern of a spiritual being, as was Jesus the Christ, we can be that too. And we can be that expression of the divine. We can be manifesting as God in this world, allowing God to come through us. Remember, at the very beginning of this book, we talked about being in the mortal mind, or being that witness, that part of us that steps back and takes a view and then speaks as one with Spirit. And in that non-reactive place, you and I can experience being that expression, and that expression is one that's going to be all good, love, life, joy, happiness, wealth. It's going to be all those characteristics of God mind manifesting in our lives. It's what we want. So you and I can make a vow. We can vow actually every morning when we get up. As we think about it, we can make a choice. We can stay in fear or love. And when we vow to stay in this place of love, in this place of joy, in this place of happiness, then we have come home to our true colors, to our true selves. I'm not saying it's easy, but we're going to see a few clips momentarily of another interview that Oprah has, and it will be with Eckhart Tolle. What we want to remember is the vow is to be true to our spiritual selves, to be true to this part of me that is life-giving, that has the ability to create happiness in my everyday life. So you and I want to make a vow to remain happy regardless of what's happening in the outer world. And then what we want to do is stay here regardless of what's going on.
Yes.
The secret to happiness, everybody, page 115. There are 3 words that convey the secret of the art of living, the secret of all success and happiness. One with life. Being one with life is being one with now, you say. You then realize that you don't live your life, but life lives you. Life is the dancer, and you are the dance. I have to tell you, I love this book, but I was like, gee, I thought life was the dance, and I was the dancer. And there are a lot of people on the web who are saying the same thing. Can you explain how life is the dancer and we are the dance? Why aren't we the dancer?
Life is dancing the dance of form, one could say. Every human being and everything that exists is part of the dance of life. That which moves you, the very consciousness that animates your being, that animates every cell of your body, that produces thoughts too. The very consciousness that you are is the one universal, the one life.
Okay.
And that permeates everything. So the entire universe is permeated by that consciousness, by life, which is another word for God.
God.
I don't see God as an entity that is in a particular place somewhere, but as the essence, the intelligence, the animating life essence behind all life forms. It's the eternal.
Get pretty serious about being happy, can't we? So smile. All right, just smile. Relax for a second. Be happy in this moment. Because, you know, we can choose to be happy regardless of what happens to us. I mean, I guess there's probably more than 1 million things that can happen to us collectively in the next month or 2 months, and we don't know what they are. And I'm kind of thankful, because I'd probably be a neurotic mess if I knew everything was going to happen in the next month, okay? So thank God we have this thing called time in the human condition that works for us. And so we can have a choice as to whether or not, as Vicki said, we're going to be happy or not be happy. And what are some of the ways we can do that? Michael Singer, who is the author of The Untethered Soul, says, keep your heart open. That's the number one thing. Now you say, no, wait a minute. How do I keep my heart open? I mean, I feel sad. And it's okay to feel sad. But did you know that you can be sad and happy at the same time? You can do it. You have that power. You can have what you consider bad things happening to you and still be happy. And when we go to that point where we open our hearts, you see, we let the universe in and we allow ourselves to be that universe coming out of us. We become the light. We become the love. We become that expression of God. And so when we open our hearts, energy rushes in and then flows back out because it doesn't have anywhere else to go. And as it flows out, you become a light to the world. And again, the way we understand is my heart open or closed is by stepping back and looking at ourselves. Where am I? What am I thinking right now? Why am I thinking that? Can I change that? Do I need to change that? And if you're feeling unhappy, you do. So one of the things is that we want to make this commitment to staying happy. And I think one of the things we have to do is pay attention to our intention. You know, Vicki gets up and says 5 things in the morning. Think of 5 things. Well, let me say that if you think of those 5 things and you forget about them, you've taken your attention off of them and you haven't set the intention of following. But when you set the intention of paying attention to where you are, then what happens is you know where you are in any given moment of the day if you want to. And when you know where you are, that's when we have the opportunity to say, I don't want to be there. I want my heart open. It feels better. It makes me happy. Makes me joyous. Makes me enjoy life more. Because I'm the dance. I'm just following life in the joy that it is. Second thing we can do is allow this pathway of unconditional happiness to be our spiritual teacher. In the Course in Miracles, it spends a great deal of time talking about fear and love, but it says, where do we learn? How do we learn this? And it says we learn it through our relationships. That's why we're here. We're here to relate to one another. And our perception of the other person, our perception of what happened, will have a lot to do with how we relate. And if I choose to see that person as my teacher, as my spiritual guide, and boy, sometimes that's hard, because they're not acting the way I want them to act. And if they don't act like I want them to act, then how in the world can I be happy with them? And what I got to do is fix them, right? I got to straighten them out. I got to tell them what's for. I got to let them know that they're not happy. I've been an expert at that, so I know what I'm talking about. So what we learn to do is see these other folks in our lives as our teachers, as our guides. And when we do that, we're again stepping back and we're opening our heart. We're becoming that expression of who we are. Each and every one of you, you've heard it over and again, are sacred souls. You are spiritual beings right here, right now. And you are in the human condition, which means that everything that's happening to you is sacred. It is sacred. It's not an accident. It's not a coincidence. It's happening to you so that you can learn from it. I'm not saying you're bringing it on to yourself so you can learn from it. I'm saying it just happens, and because we live in this human condition, we can elect to be happy in it or be unhappy in it. Two guys died at the same time, and they went up and had a little interview with God. And God said, well, how was your experience in life? And the guy said, it was terrible. I was born in the wrong neighborhood. I couldn't find a decent job. I couldn't get my life together. Everybody was against me. And life was painful for me. And I just want you to know that. And I wish you had done something to change it. God said, thank you very much. Other guy comes up. So happens the guy was born in the same neighborhood. Same background. God said, how was life for you? And God was expecting this answer, like he just heard. And the guy said, it was wonderful. You know, I was able to get out of my thinking, and I was able to really grow in such a way that I was able to help my parents also out of what we were born into. I was able to, over time, and it took me 40 years to get a good education, but I got it. I ended up getting married and having these wonderful children who are a joy of my life. I have lived in happiness. I am so excited. Thank you for the experience. God said, thank you. St. Peter came over and said, God, what did you think of that? Especially that first guy. God said, I don't think anything about it. He just lived the life he wanted to live. And the other guy did so also. No difference. They just lived the life they chose to live. God doesn't get involved in that. I hate to tell you that. God doesn't walk around and worry about whether you're happy or not. Okay? Not at all. God says, it's okay. I'm saying yes to you. You can have the life you want. You can be happy, you can be sad, and it's fine with me. That's what Eckhart Tolle was talking about, a God of principle. And so when we open our hearts to God and when we are willing to accept this path, the next thing that happens is we find happiness and we find God. That's where God is within us. That's where our happiness is within us. But we have to step back sometimes and say, wait a minute. I was taught something else. I got to change my mind. I got to look at it differently. Boy, it's hard. I wonder if they were right and I'm wrong. Wow, I don't know. I got to think about that. Oh my goodness gracious, maybe I made a mistake, so I'll start to get sad about it. Okay? Because nobody else agrees with what I believe anymore. Or it doesn't feel like it. But what really happens is when we start to step back and look at that, we say, you know, what I believe is what I believe. What I feel is what I feel. What I experience is what I experience. And it's okay. Because I can be in the isness of it. I can be in the beingness of it. I can allow it to be part of me and it's flowing through me. It's not me. And as we do that, we are able to come to understand that we find God in that moment. Because when you open your heart, when you take that path of least resistance, interestingly enough, and when you do that, you experience the truth of who you are. And you are God. You are an expression of God. Michael Beckwith says, I am because thou art. And then he goes on to say, thou art because I am. Oh, put some meaning to it, doesn't it? If I keep thinking about that God out there, that's the thou art, and I don't connect it with the thou am, right? I get confused. But when we put it together, not only does it give us responsibility, it gives an opportunity to see within ourselves the unlimited nature of who we are and what we are. So we find happiness and we find God. And after we do that, you see, we then live from happiness rather than for happiness. When I live for happiness, I'm looking out there for the answers. Somebody said I bought a car and it didn't make me happy, but I thought it was because it was a lemon. See, those things can't make us happy. Oh, temporarily we can be joyous. I mean, I just showed you that new phone I got, okay? I'm already unhappy with it because it's too big. And I wanted a bigger phone. I really like it, actually. But anyway, so what we have to understand, again, is that we live from happiness. We find the happiness right where we are, right now, right here, in the moment. And then we can allow life to be the dancer and ourselves to be the dance. And as we do that, we start to learn that we can live from happiness even in the face of death. Let's listen to this video on the idea of death.
So let me ask you the big question. You have no fear of death?
No, no. The ego has dissolved, and so only the ego fears death. I know there is no death.
You know there is no death. Okay, tell me how.
I have a little thing at the end of this chapter.
I know, you say the incontrovertible proof of immortality. I read that and I went, okay, well, I read that.
I've done a little thing I did there. Usually when people talk about immortality, they use certain arguments, perhaps from physics. They say the energy is destroyed. Energy can only become transformed.
That's right, transformed.
So the vital energy that is your life, because energy cannot be destroyed, must survive in some form. That's often the argument for the survival of that life. There is no death, only the form dissolves.
Okay, so continuing here, so there's no such thing as my life, and I don't have a life. I am life. I and life are one. It cannot be otherwise. So how could I lose my life? How can I lose something that I don't have in the first place? How can I lose something that I am? It is impossible. So what is happening here is, I just got it. Hello, hello, hello. Bing, 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 bing. I got it. We are confusing the I am life force with our bodies.
Yes, yes.
We're confusing that.
Yes, that's right, that's right.
So when this dies and becomes the shell and dissipates and the atoms go wherever they go, back into the ground, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, we are confusing that which is the physical form, the human, we're confusing that with the being.
Yes, that's right.
And they are separate.
I kind of like that video because you see, every time she started talking about death a little bit, she went, you know, right? So come on, energy was there. I don't know what it was, but anyway. One of the great things, one of the beautiful things of being in ministry, and I never thought this would be the case, is to be with somebody as they prepare to make their transition. To be there sometimes for as much as 3 years, sometimes for as little as 2 weeks. And what I have found with most everybody, not everybody, but most everybody, they are not afraid of death. Most of them would like to stay a little while longer, and that's normal. But they're not afraid of death. They embrace death. because they understand they are not their body. And when we understand we are not our body, we then start to understand that, as Oprah said, and as he said, we are energy. If God is energy and I am energy, and energy cannot be destroyed, then I'm going to continue being. Now, I can't prove this, but I just have a theory that says whatever my consciousness is today, if I get run over by the Mack truck, it'll be the same thing on the other side. I'll just be more aware of it. And I'll be aware of the parts that really work and the parts that maybe aren't working as well. Maybe I'll sign a contract to come back or go somewhere else to one of those other mansions. I don't know. But I believe consciousness continues. I believe that we will continue. So one of the things we can do is learn to prepare ourselves for death. And one of the ways I did this many, many years ago, I was 35 years old, and I prepared myself for death. I didn't know that at the time. But a group of managers that I worked with, we had a team, and we all went to Connecticut to meet with this guy who was going to help us be better managers. And we weren't there a day, but that he got us to all lie down on the floor. Now, today that would be, okay, fine, I'm ready for that, all right, everybody knows we do that. But in the 70s, it was like, what? Bunch of guys laying around the floor, and he said, yeah, I want you to lay that now, I want you to just close your eyes. Probably was my first meditation ever. And I want you to think about how you would live life if you only knew you had 1 week to live. And now I want you to talk about it. Now we're laying on the floor looking up at the ceiling, and we're talking to each other about what would I do. One guy said, I love the seashore, so I'm going to go down to the seashore and I'm going to spend a day there. But you see, I've got to spend the rest of the time with my family, my kids, my uncle, my aunt, my mother, my dad. I just need to spend that time with them and tell them how much I love them. Pretty serious stuff all of a sudden. You know, one guy said, I want to go out to the Grand Canyon. I've never seen it, and I'm going to fly out there for one day and fly back. That's what I'm going to do because I want to see that before I leave. And then there's other things, and most of it's centered around family, as we would suspect. Very little of it centered around getting straight with God, by the way. I thought that was pretty fascinating. And then they said, well, okay, fine. Now, what happens if you die 2 months from now? And people started to say, well, you know, I'd spend a week getting ready and getting my family, but after that, I don't know. And they named, I'd go to Hawaii and I'd go to London or I'd do this and that. All kinds of stuff we came up with, creative ideas. And then they said, what happens if you knew 6 months from now you were going to die? And all but one person in the room said I would continue doing what I am doing now. The one person in the room who said differently quit his job when he got home because he knew he wasn't happy. He wasn't called to do what he was doing. And the rest of us felt we were called to do what we were doing in that moment. Live your life in such a way that you think you might die next week. How would you treat each other? How would you treat your children? How would you treat friends? Would you have anybody you feel like you just got to talk to straighten some things out? Could you move through that in happiness? Because that's what we're looking for. And death can teach us that. Or the thought of death can teach us that. I don't want to do it tomorrow, but I'm ready. Because I know it's just a transition. It's just a change. I want to be like my uncle who just made just under 92 years old and passed away this week. I like that idea. And I thought to myself, that's not even 20 years from now. What in the world, Richard? Maybe you're not as happy with... No, anyway. But I thought about that. And so, you know, I think that the job is, again, to prepare ourselves as though we were going to die. And when we do that, we start to see through the eyes of a loving God. We start to see ourselves as being, like the Tao says, in the middle. That there's no good or bad. There just is. Because when we start to evaluate things and we say, well, that's good, and this is bad, or this is all good, there's nothing bad, we're still fooling ourselves a little bit because, you see, we're starting to become attached to an idea of how it should be. And then we start to resist any change that we think is happening because of that. So we have to step into this idea of who we are. We have to see it through the eyes of a loving God. And when we do that, we have that experience. We have that direct experience of God. You don't identify with spirit by reaching for spirit. Rather, you simply let go of all the rest, releasing the personal stuff, and you will be a beautiful, untethered soul.